Hello, all you freedom-loving people. The Supreme Court will examine Maxwell's petition behind closed doors. The Fed decided not to lower interest rates, and Evergrande, China's real estate giant, was delisted from the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. Okay, let's get into it. Today, the Supreme Court revealed that Maxwell's appeal for her sex trafficking conviction will be among the many cases that the High Court reviews at a closed-door conference in September. The Supreme Court posted a brief notice saying that it plans to examine a petition from Maxwell on September 29th. So within days or weeks after September 29th, we should learn whether the Supreme Court plans to review Maxwell's case or not. This means that if the Supreme Court denies Maxwell's petition, she has no appeal option left. But if the Supreme Court grants it, that means that the Supreme Court will review Maxwell's arguments that she was improperly prosecuted. Yesterday, we explained that Maxwell has argued that she should have been immune from prosecution due to an agreement that Jeffrey Epstein made with federal prosecutors before his death. Yesterday, we also mentioned an audio file that was circulating on social media with President Trump talking about more details about why he threw Jeffrey Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago. The audio was recorded when President Trump was chatting with the press on his way back from Scotland on Air Force One. And today, the video of the conversation was also made available.
Well, I don't want to say, but everyone knows the people that were taken. And it was the concept of taking people that work for me is bad. But that story's been pretty well out there. And the answer is yes, they were.
Yes, they were? Yes.
Yeah.
What did they do?
In the spa.
What kind of jobs? In the spa?
Yeah, it's people that work in the spa. I have a great spa, one of the best spas in the world at Mar-a-Lago. And people were taken out of the spa, hired by him. In other words, gone. And other people would come and complain, this guy is taking people from the spa. I didn't know that. And then when I heard about it, I told him, I said, listen, we don't want you taking our people, whether it was spa or not spa. I don't want him taking people. And he was fine. And then not too long after that, he did it again. And I said, out of here.
Mr. President, did one of those stolen, persons, that include Virginia Jeffrey?
I don't know. I think she worked at the spa. I think so. I think that was one of the people. Yeah. He stole her. And by the way, she had no complaints about us, as you know. None whatsoever.
And in other breaking news today, FBI Director Patel found a trove of sensitive documents related to the origins of Russiagate. The newly found documents were apparently buried in multiple burn bags in a secret room inside the Bureau. Reportedly, the multiple burn bags are filled with thousands of documents. The burn bag system is used to destroy documents that are designated as classified or higher. According to Fox News, one of the documents that FBI officials found in a burn bag was the classified annex to former special counsel John Durham's final report, which includes the underlying intelligence that he reviewed. The declassified annex will be transmitted to Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley, and Grassley will ultimately release the document to the public. It's not yet clear, however, what the latest documents will exactly cover, but apparently they are pursuant to an investigative request from Grassley. On Wednesday morning, local time, a strong earthquake with a magnitude of 8.8 occurred off the far east of Russia. The quake was a shallow earthquake with a depth of about 19 kilometers. More than 200 aftershocks occurred in the following 24 hours, and the earthquake triggered a tsunami. The 4-meter-high tsunami inundated a small port town in Russia with a population of about 2,000. The Geophysical Research Department of the Russian Academy of Sciences said that it was the strongest earthquake to hit the area since 1952. The strong earthquake also triggered tsunami warnings in many Pacific countries. The warning covered Japan, Hawaii, the west coast of North and South America, Alaska, parts of Southeast Asia, Guam, and several Pacific Island nations. Tsunami waves reached Alaska and Hawaii on Tuesday night, with waves over 5 feet high observed in Maui and Hawaii. However, no destructive waves have been observed and no disaster or power outages have been reported. Currently, the wave heights observed off the east coast of Japan are much lower than the initial prediction of 3 meters, with the highest waves being only 1.3 meters. However, the situation could change at any time. Waves of 30 centimeters in the Aleutian Islands of Alaska were also observed. Tsunami experts have warned that the speed of tsunami waves caused by such earthquakes can be as fast as jets. And even if the tsunami waves are only 30 centimeters high, they can still wash people away, and the destructive power of tsunamis must not be underestimated. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center also issued an early warning to Australia, adding that waves of 0.3 to 1 meters in height were possible in coastal areas. After the earthquake, the highest volcano in Eurasia erupted. Satellite images show the ash column rising to about 6,000 meters and spreading eastward. The third round of trade talks between the U.S. and China concluded in Stockholm on Tuesday without any major breakthroughs. Speaking to reporters in Stockholm, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that extending the truce of tariffs for another 90 days was an option. However, the pause will not be final until President Trump signs off on the plan. President Trump said we'll either approve it or not. But Bessent felt very good about the meeting, better than he felt yesterday. Bessent doesn't think it's a big deal, even if the tariffs go back to the high tariff situation of April. Bessent said, "I would think that it's not the end of the world if these snapback tariffs are on for anywhere from a few days to a few weeks. As long as the countries are moving forward and trying to negotiate in good faith." While nothing was agreed upon, trade agreements with other countries were discussed. Bessent said that China was surprised by the magnitude of the U.S. trade deal with Japan and the magnitude in terms of the trade deal with Europe. The Treasury Secretary said that the U.S. is concerned about China's overcapacity on a global scale and the impact that this could have on this year and the years ahead. The U.S. is also concerned about the Chinese Communist Party's purchase of Iranian oil. The CCP buys about 90% of Iran's oil. Bessent further said that the U.S. also deeply regretted the sale of civilian and military technology worth about $15 billion from the CCP to Russia. U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer said that the U.S. also reiterated that President Trump's trade plan and trade policies are premised on reducing the U.S. deficit, increasing manufacturing, and revitalizing the U.S. economy. They made sure that the communist side understands that this is what President Trump is trying to accomplish. Bessent mentioned that the negotiators did not discuss TikTok. He said, "We are very careful to keep trade and national security separate." Bessent also gave the CCP golden advice, which he believes is the common ground for a trade agreement with the CCP. He said that China's manufacturing sector is too strong, but its domestic demand market is too weak. The opposite is true for the United States. The U.S. has a hollow manufacturing sector currently, but a strong domestic market. His description of the current state of China is accurate. We use the decline in sales of Haagen-Dazs ice cream and Apple cell phones in China as an example yesterday to illustrate specifically the state of weak domestic demand in China. The latest news is that Evergrande, the icon of Chinese real estate, was delisted from the Hong Kong Stock Exchange on Tuesday. Established in 1996 and listed in Hong Kong in 2009, the Evergrande Group was once one of the most glamorous representatives of China's real estate industry. At its peak, Evergrande's business spanned a wide range of areas, including bottled water, electric vehicles, soccer clubs, and theme parks. In 2017, Evergrande's market capitalization reached $45.21 billion US dollars. Of course, its debt is even higher, almost dozens of times its market capitalization, at one point exceeding $300 billion. So, are you wondering why Evergrande was able to borrow money when its debt far exceeded its market capitalization? The reason for this is the extreme perception of the Chinese public about the real estate sector and the abnormal state of China's real estate sector as a whole, as we mentioned on the program yesterday. In the eyes of the public and investors, real estate never loses money. You don't even have to look at the financial statements of a real estate company. Just close your eyes and invest your money. Evergrande's owners apparently think so too. That's why they dared to borrow and spend like crazy. Finally, in 2021, the turning point for the real estate industry appeared. Because of the pandemic lockdown, real estate sales stalled. Evergrande's capital chain was quickly broken, resulting in a large number of construction stoppages and payment defaults. This series of conditions led to a collapse in investor confidence. By the end of the year, Evergrande had defaulted on its offshore bonds, triggering global fears of a spreading crisis in China's real estate market. Evergrande has been in a state of collapse ever since. On January 29, 2024, the High Court of Hong Kong ruled that Evergrande must go into compulsory liquidation and appoint a liquidator to take over Evergrande's assets both inside and outside Hong Kong. Evergrande's share price before the suspension was only 2 cents per share, and its total market capitalization had shrunk to $270 million, which is less than 1% of its peak. According to the rule of the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, a company must be delisted if it has been suspended from trading for 18 consecutive months, and Tuesday was the deadline for Evergrande to submit a reorganization plan, but Evergrande did nothing. So it was officially delisted from the market. Raymond Chung, an independent analyst, said that Evergrande's debt is so huge and asset quality so low that it is difficult to provide an effective restructuring plan, and the result of the downgrade is not surprising. So the Fed released its interest rate decision today. As the market generally expected, the Fed kept interest rates unchanged again. So whether it will cut rates in September has become the focus of attention. And after the decision, President Trump sent a note to Powell.
And if you look at this chart, this is a chart of all of the interest rates of many countries throughout the world. At the top is Switzerland. They're only paying a quarter for interest rates. Cambodia, Japan, Denmark, Thailand, Botswana, Barbados, Taiwan, Bulgaria, Cuba, Sweden, Morocco, Cabo Verde, South Korea, Algeria, Canada, Albania, Libya, Malaysia, China, New Zealand, Trinidad and Tobago, Czechia, Bolivia, Australia, Costa Rica, the Bahamas, Kuwait, Papua New Guinea, Bosnia, United Kingdom, and the UAE are all paying lower interest rates than the United States of America, which has one of the hottest and strongest economies in the world. The president sent this note to the Fed chair. It says, Jerome, you are as usual too late. You have cost the USA a fortune and continue to do so. You should lower the rate by a lot. Hundreds of billions of dollars are being lost, and there is no inflation.
Fed officials are in rare disagreement over whether to cut interest rates in the future. Currently, there are 2 members of the FOMC who have clearly expressed their support for a rate cut. We know that Fed Chairman Jerome Powell is not the only one who decides whether or not to cut interest rates. Although he is in control of the policy direction, interest rate decisions still need to be voted on by the committee. Currently, there are 3 factions within the Fed. The faction that advocates immediate rate cuts, the faction that calls for observing more economic data, and the faction that keeps interest rates unchanged. At the beginning of this year, because President Trump's tariff policy triggered inflation concerns, the Fed once united to pause interest rate cuts. However, the recent lower-than-expected price increases and signs of cooling in the job market have gradually disintegrated the Fed's internal consensus. Christian Hoffman, the head of fixed income and portfolio manager at the investment management firm Thornburg Investment Management, said that the Fed was unlikely to cut interest rates at today's policy meeting and that they will leave them unchanged. He said that there had been some favorable inflation data recently, but the inflation indicator that the Fed is looking at, which is the Personal Consumption Expenditure Index, was not favorable. He argued that the labor market continues to be strong, making it difficult to predict a significant rate cut. While President Trump had pressured Powell in every way possible to lower interest rates, the Fed has stood by their own independent judgment. But that's not to say that the Fed is 100% independent regardless of government considerations ever. What exactly is the relationship between the two? Their relationship is not something that can be explained in a single sentence. They are not simply independent of each other, nor do they work in tandem with each other either. So, how do we understand their relationship? Let's go back to the bankers' original intent in establishing the Fed. Yesterday we talked about the financial crisis in 1907 that triggered the creation of the Fed. The financial crisis erupted in 1907, but the Fed was not established until 1913. So why was there a 6-year delay in between? As we said earlier, Americans do not trust the central government. If the government wanted to establish a central bank to control monetary policy, bankers and the general public would certainly be reluctant. But if the central bank was completely out of the control of the government, then the government would certainly not be happy either. Even so, after many years of negotiation and dispute, all parties finally compromised, and the Federal Reserve System is the product of the balances of factors between all parties. The Federal Reserve's entirety is the Federal Reserve System, not a bank. It consists of a system of 12 regional reserve banks that are owned by bankers who own banks, which in turn own shares in the Fed. These 12 reserve banks have their own jurisdictions, and they are responsible for regulating commercial banks within their region. Each of the reserve banks is held by thousands of commercial banks within that region. So the Federal Reserve is an institution held by private banks. These banks have free rein in administrative matters, but decisions on key monetary policies such as raising interest rates and printing money are made by the Federal Open Market Committee, the FOMC, which is the decision-making arm of the Fed. This FOMC consists of 12 people who then form the most influential financial panel in the world. How the government can influence the Fed is reflected in the selection of these 12 individuals. 7 of the 12 are Board of Governors, including the Fed chair. These 7 are nominated by the President and confirmed by the Senate. The chair serves a 4-year term and can be re-elected. The other 6 serve 14-year terms. The President must have chosen those who share in his philosophy or communicate more smoothly with him to join the FOMC. That means that the President controls more than half of the FOMC. The remaining 5 seats are rotated among regional Fed chairs, but because of the special status of the New York Fed, the President of the New York Fed has always held a position, as opposed to only 4 seats that are rotated among other regional Fed chairs. But it doesn't mean that these 7 people will always defer to the President in the future. This is because once they are appointed, the President can't fire them at will. The President needs the consent of more than 2/3 of Congress if he wants to remove one of the FOMC members. And of course, the local Federal Reserve has a board of directors with 9 members. 3 of those members are elected by the Board of Governors of the FOMC. So it's sort of people who think along the same lines as the government. The core idea embodied in this complex set of mechanisms is controls and balances. One of the goals of almost all presidents has been to get the economy right, or in the short term, so that they can be re-elected. It should be said that the Fed's aim is to maintain sustained economic growth, but it's more concerned with long-term economic health than with short-term economic data. Short-term goals often conflict with long-term goals, and we'll use specific examples of these later on. But the U.S. government and the Fed also have something in common, which is that they both wish to ensure the independence of the Fed and the impartiality of its decision-making. But note that I said both sides wish the Fed to remain independent and impartial in their decision-making. This is if these decision makers, including the administration and the president, are not swayed by self-interest. The cornerstone of the Fed is the trust of global markets. The more the global market trusts the Fed, the more people will use the dollar, and the more influence the United States will have. The Fed is aware of this, and the U.S. government is also aware of this causality. The Fed's neutrality mechanism is designed to preserve that trust. The long-term benefits of this trust are far greater than the short-term benefits to the government on a few short-term monetary policies. But decision makers are people who live in society. So people are inevitably swayed by their own interests. Therefore, several major games between the Fed and the government have been played in history. We'll talk more tomorrow about the conflict between the Fed and the White House that has major implications. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page. Please remember to leave us a comment below the video. This is really helping us to be seen all around the world. The more people who watch Front Page, the more freedom-loving people the world will have. And please hit the like button and hit the notification bell after subscribing. And please share this video with your friends and family because everybody deserves to know the truth.